Its towering skyline and world-leading technology make New York the ultimate city of the future. Yet breathtaking new discoveries unveil that the blueprints for this mega metropolis were laid thousands of years ago. From brutal blood sports staged in ancient Madison Square Gardens to Times Square celebrations at a gigantic Neolithic calendar, you are about to discover that everything you thought you knew about the Big Apple, in fact, comes from our distant forefathers. This is the extraordinary story of ancient New York. New York is a city of miracles that reaches for the sky. The Empire State Building, Wall Street, Times Square. America begins its year according to New York. The world counts its money according to Wall Street's ebbs and flows. An area smaller than 20 sports stadiums projects its influence and culture all across the globe. Are these wonders of the modern world, or is it possible that the same discoveries were made in our distant past? Incredible new discoveries reveal that New York's most celebrated features were actually invented by the ancient city builders before becoming lost to time.
If you look at the big cities of the ancient world, at Athens, at Rome, at Alexandria, at Babylon, these were extraordinary places. They were places that people talked about, that were kind of legendary in their own lifetime.
We have uncovered proof of ancient city streets that were lined with movie theaters 2,000 years before Steven Spielberg. Giant stadiums with retractable roofs. Secret underground passageways that brought life to millions. The truth may rewrite the story of how man went from living in ancient settlements to the greatest city on Earth.
Whatever their problems, cities are where people want to be. People still come to cities like magnets. Once that started, once civilization as we know it has begun, there is absolutely no turning back.
Every capital city in the ancient world needed a monument, an amazing structure that would unify the citizens and cement the city's identity. In New York, that monument is the Statue of Liberty, which has greeted immigrants sailing in from the New World since 1886.
For Americans, the Statue of Liberty symbolizes freedom. Probably for the world, it symbolizes freedom.
But amazingly, it might not be with us today were it not for an ingenious secret of engineering buried within the ruins of antiquity's greatest city structure. According to legend, the Greek island of Rhodes was home in the 4th century BC to one of the fabled 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes. This towering monument soared 110 feet up into the heavens, just 40 feet shy of the New York statue's peak. Its hands measured 13 feet long, and it weighed more than 225 tons. At the city of Rhodes, nothing remains of the original Colossus. Why did it disappear? And how could its mysterious demise be helping the Statue of Liberty to survive today? Piecing together clues from 2,300-year-old bronze fragments and ancient engineering manuals, we set out to piece together the riddle of the Rhodes Colossus destruction. Our investigation begins over 300 years before the birth of Christ, when Rhodes was engulfed by a giant sieging army led by the general Demetrius Policetes. At its head was a siege structure over 140 feet high called a helepolis, which in ancient Greek means taker of cities. The citizens of Rhodes were successful in resisting Demetrius. The siege was abandoned after a year, leaving behind the mighty Helepolis.
came in 305, and by 304, he had not managed to take the city despite having used the most advanced techniques and most sophisticated siege machines of antiquity.
In celebration of their victory, the people erected the Colossus of Rhodes as thanks to the sun god Helios. And they used Demetrius's giant taker of cities siege machine to create a building technique far in advance of its time: ancient scaffolding. The siege machine's towering 9-story frame was used to support teams of workers who built stone columns in the figure's inner core.
Theory has it that the Colossus of Rhodes was constructed with ancient materials. They were more using masonry back then, so they used masonry for probably the 2 legs, so they created columns, which is something the Greeks were very good at. So it was very good in compression. It could hold the weight of a structure, but at some point they had to add iron to it and then develop the skin on the iron, very similar to the Statue of Liberty.
Over 2,000 years after the stunning Colossus was created, the best physical clue in existence regarding its mysteries is the Statue of Liberty. Just as the Colossus symbolized unity and victory for ancient Rhodes, so does the Statue of Liberty for people of modern America. And the direct link of the Statue of Liberty to the Rhodes Colossus can be traced through the man who designed it: French architect Auguste Bartholdi.
Auguste Bartholdi, who designed the statue, studied the classical art of the period. As a student, he learned about the works of the great Greek and Roman architects. And that took him soon to Egypt, where he began to study the colossal statues of there, including the Colossi of Memnon. But the Colossus of Rhodes really attracted him because he was interested in gigantic monumental statuary. He was obsessed by it. So he was very much determined to bring out of the past of antiquity into the modern world a modern Colossus.
Architect Glenn Leach has spent a lifetime studying the Statue of Liberty's structure. He was brought in after the attacks of September the 11th to re-examine the statue's security measures and to do what the ancients couldn't, to ensure his city monument survives the test of time.
The Statue of Liberty has always had a special place in my heart. I grew up on Staten Island, and I saw the Statue of Liberty hundreds of times taking the ferry, and the fact that I worked on the Statue of Liberty and helped modernize it and take it into the 21st century was a wonderful treat for me, and something I'll always be pretty proud of.
Over the course of his examination of the New York statue, Glenn has begun unraveling the unerring engineering parallels between these two city monuments.
There's a lot of comparisons between the Colossus and the modern Colossus, the Statue of Liberty. I think the big one is their location. They both sat on prominent waterfronts at their time. At both of their times, they were the largest structures that existed.
Glenn has used all his knowledge of the Statue of Liberty to unravel how the Colossus of Rhodes would have looked 23 centuries ago.
The copper has aged over time, what they call noble rust. And the noble rust color is actually that green patina that we see in the statue. Where in the Colossus, they say that the bronze remained shiny, which would have been a pretty amazing structure to see a bronze shiny statue.
Building the Colossus of Rhodes was a phenomenal achievement. Thousands of workers took over 12 years to complete a project that would cost an estimated $3 billion in today's money. Yet the ancient records reveal that this stunning monument only survived in historical terms for the blink of an eye.
So unfortunately, after only 52 years, the Colossus of Rhodes failed and buckled at its knees because of an earthquake.
Rhodes' tragic disaster has terrifying parallels with modern New York. For the Big Apple lies at a crossroads of several giant tectonic fault lines. Experts predict that one day a major quake could cause catastrophic damage. The Statue of Liberty would come crashing into the harbor. But engineers learned from the collapse of the Rhodes Colossus and made a crucial alteration to the surface structure of the Statue of Liberty.
This is a model of what the skin may have looked like. It's shown as acrylic, but this was actually the copper skin held by an iron bar that was formed to the shape of each piece of skin in the statue. It was allowed to move back and forth, which gave the whole statue flexibility and allowed it to move during wind.
The Statue of Liberty is thus able to bend in the wind up to 5 inches in any direction. This ingenious design feature could save the statue from suffering a similar fate as the ancient Colossus.
The Statue of Liberty is built around a box truss within the structure. So it's a long truss that sits on top of the pedestal, but is grounded within the pedestal, which actually makes it taller and more stable, almost like putting a stick into the sand so that there's more structure underneath. The pedestal acts more like a footing so that the statue has much more strength.
The legacy of the Rhodes Colossus lives not just in New York's greatest monument, but in every modern skyscraper and every modern city.
Symbolic images are important to a lot of cities. If you look at Rhodes, it had its Colossus. New York had its Statue of Liberty. I think it's a really important part of any great city is to have a symbol.
But beyond the phenomenal grandeur and ambition of the ancient city builders was a far more fundamental challenge: survival. How did a secret tunnel bored over half a mile through a mountain save an ancient city from dehydration and death? New York is a thriving metropolis of over 9 million people. The city acts as a magnet, drawing people from all over the world into one giant melting pot. At its heart is Manhattan, an island that for over 300 years has struggled with one critical challenge: how to provide all its people with enough water. To supply New York with water into the future, the city has launched its greatest ever engineering project, the New York City Water Tunnel. A $6 billion project built with ground-penetrating radar and mobile drilling factories. The ancients had none of this when creating an urban water tunnel of their own. The question is, how? On the island of Samos in the Aegean Sea lie the ruins of a once great city with uncanny parallels to Manhattan Island. 2,500 years ago, it had plumbing, baths, and sewage facilities like any modern city. But like Manhattan, although it was surrounded by water, producing enough fresh water for the city's people was a massive challenge.
In Samos, you have a particularly mind-bending problem, that you have a thriving, busy, highly populated city, you've got a fantastic water spring, and you've got a mountain in between the two. But what the Samians do is very, very clever and extremely ambitious. They decide that they're not going to go round the mountain. What they're going to aim to do is to bore a channel through the heart of the mountain itself.
They built a gigantic tunnel stretching over half a mile underground, and they called it the Tunnel of Eupalinos. This was a project of staggering ambition, for the ancient Greeks built the Tunnel of Eupalinos in the same way that modern engineers are building the New York City water tunnel, by digging from both ends at the same time.
They have decided to dig from both sides simultaneously to show that they can defeat the mountain.
Unlike the modern New York engineers, the ancient Greeks' tunnel was painstakingly carved out by hand over 8 years. But after 400 yards of tunneling, they hit a problem that threatened to throw the project into disaster. The limestone rock was fragile and liable to collapse.
And this was a very, very difficult moment. First of all, they were in complete dark. They have the consolation of seeing the light of the entrance. Second, they were unable to know where they were finding themselves.
The tunnelers on the north side were forced to change course. To make the meeting point now would require extraordinarily accurate calculations. While New York's engineers had state-of-the-art 3D mapping technology, the ancient Greeks had neither compass nor topographic map, nor even any written mathematics at their disposal. Their ingenious accuracy came by placing 3 identical wooden posts inside the tunnel and looking along them as though through a rifle sight to ensure that they form a line that fires straight through the mountain. In the final section of the tunnel, the engineers adjusted their course. The million-dollar moment had arrived. After 3,000 feet of tunneling, the two teams met to within 2 feet of each other. Samos, the Manhattan of the ancient world, at last had a water supply.
I think when they did this, they were just 60 centimetres apart, which is a fantastic feat of engineering.
The Samos water tunnel supplied up to 10,000 people with water. Yet as the ancient city builders grew in ambition, they needed technology that could supply water on a truly epic scale. And this called for the limitless ingenuity of the Romans. At its height 2,000 years ago, Rome was a superpower just like America today. Rome's empire was home to over 120 million people across 3 continents and 2.5 million square miles of land. So how did the Romans produce enough water to quench the thirst of their gargantuan empire? In Gresham Street, in the heart of central London, archaeologists in 2001 made an intriguing discovery. They found the remains of what appears to be a Roman water wheel. Out of these broken fragments, leading engineer Tony Taylor hopes to unravel the secrets of the Roman water engineers. Through careful ancient detective work, he is seeking to reconstruct a water wheel that matches the Roman designs.
We formed a team to create the reconstruction. Our first objective, though, was to understand as best as we could from the artifacts themselves what form the reconstruction should take.
Tony's quest sees him draw upon evidence from Roman drawings and artifacts and ancient water wheels all over the world. Then he uses state-of-the-art computer imaging to design his Roman water wheel in 3 dimensions. The final results of the team's reconstruction are located at the Museum of London.
So we have here just the 2 slaves, and they are rotating this capstan. This in turn turns these upper gears on the horizontal here, and that in turn turns the horizontal axis with the vertical gear, which takes us across the drive shaft into the drive wheel. The drive wheel is a very complex component. It is carrying a double chain with the buckets attached, which rotate over the top of the wheel and then discharge into the channel here where the water is taken away at high level. Inside that wheel, you can see that the water is discharging at points through these V-shaped cutouts in the timber.
The largest of all the Roman water wheels were truly enormous machines, driven by up to 50 slaves at a time. Even this small water wheel can produce an incredible amount of water.
We believe we're producing as much as 15,000 to 18,000 gallons a day.
From this small contraption, enough water could be produced to allow almost 300 people to wash, drink, clean, and cook every day. This water wheel was just one of a network of thousands of water wheels in the empire that fed a system of man-made stone canals called aqueducts. The combined length of all Rome's aqueducts would stretch over 300 miles, providing cities throughout the empire with fresh water.
The Romans were particularly proficient at providing their citizens with water. If you look at Rome at the height of its power, when there are about 1 million people living there, they managed to guarantee that every single person is going to have access to about 250 gallons of water per person. I mean, that's much more than we can expect to have today.
Once the ancient engineers were able to generate all the water they needed, they developed entertainment extravaganzas, that made water flow uphill. New York is the city that never sleeps. Movies, musicals, and shows run 24 hours a day. On Broadway alone, 12 million people every year buy tickets to the grandest, most extraordinary shows on the planet. Yet the birth of these entertainment extravaganzas can be traced to the birth of ancient cities themselves, a time when people flooded into the ancient cities and a wealth of new jobs were created, from bankers to lawyers to architects.
And some people in those cities become much, much richer than others through trade, through natural prowess, through strength and good health and being proficient in war. As soon as you get people who are top dogs, those top dogs decide they don't want to work that hard. They want other people to do their dirty work for them.
In Alexandria, in around 100 BC, members of the elite invited inventors to wild and extravagant parties. The most successful of these showmen was a man named Heron.
Heron in particular was a great showman, and he enjoyed publicising his work, and he did this in numerous ways, we believe. One was to give sort of small intimate demonstrations of some of his pieces, like dinner parties to the elite, the initiated, the educated.
He would arrive at high society functions and demonstrate new and exciting gadgets and gizmos to his audience. Over 1,500 years before New York was even founded, Heron invented a way of making water flow uphill. Unlike the fountains of Central Park or downtown New York, his device operated without electricity or pumps, or even any human power. How Heron achieved this has been a mystery for 2,000 years. Richard Windley, model-making chief of the Ancient Discoveries team, thinks he knows the answer.
So what we have basically is a bowl here which is going to be filled with liquid. So what happens is when that valve's opened, all the water from this top vessel will run as quickly as the tube will allow down into a glass vessel below, which is sealed. As it fills up, it compresses the air in that vessel, forces it up a pipe. This air pressure then comes into the vessel which is above here.
The fountain's tubes and chambers form a totally sealed system. Neither air nor water can escape. So when the water falls, the air is forced upwards and into the second chamber. This new air, in turn, forces the water up and into the bowl.
I'll fill the vessel up now, lift the valve, and we can see if it actually works.
Heron's fountain was said to have literally defied gravity. And if Richard's model works, the fountain should be able to refill again and again for hours on end.
I've just lifted the valve out now. We can see the water is draining from this top vessel as fast as that pipe will carry it really down into the bottom vessel. That's starting to fill up. The pressure of that water under gravity is compressing the air in that bottom vessel. The pressure's building up, and as it comes into this top one, we should any minute now get a spurt of water out of the top one, which should land in the bowl, hopefully. Yes, there we go, it's starting to work now. And hopefully that should squirt into the bowl, or possibly a bit beyond. Yeah, there it goes, there it goes. Now the bowl's starting to get towards the end, so the pressure's dropping right back, and the jet has almost ceased now.
But as entertainment developed, audiences demanded ever more advanced technical wizardry. While Heron developed magical theaters, other inventors set about creating the world's first cinemas. To many, the birth of the glitzy, glamorous world of cinema began around the time of the first stars, like Charlie Chaplin. Yet the true origins of cinema are in fact over 1,600 years earlier, and 5,000 miles to the east. In the Three Kingdoms period, around the 3rd century AD, local stories began to tell of a mythical form of sorcery, a dark art producing terrifying moving images.
right up until the 16th century, when Jesuit missionaries actually brought back reports of some of these scientific advances that China had already achieved. And one of the things that reoccurs several times is this idea of optical devices. When we're familiar with movie cinemas, we're familiar with big screen projection televisions. These shadow plays would have been not for a single viewer, but would have been for sort of quite substantial numbers of viewers within an audience.
Richard believes he has unraveled the mysterious instrument that created such images. An ancient magical lantern.
This is a little bamboo frame. We've got like parchment paper stretched tautly over the sides of the box. And this is the little fan, turbine if you want to call it that. And the hot air rising from the candles, which will be inside the lantern. The hot air rises through these and just causes it to rotate. We're going to have 4 candles inside there. The little spike you can see in the middle is simply the support for the centre of this. And it uses like a kind of needle bearing in the top, i.e. a needle just running inside a small hole, which provides very, very little friction.
These simple devices were used to create complex stories of famous comedies, dances, journeys, and battles. Had the ancient Chinese magicians known to add one simple feature, an optical lens to aid in the projection of the images, then the advent of feature films may have advanced some 2 millennia, and the world of Hollywood today would perhaps be unrecognizable. 5,000 years before the Chinese magic lantern came a yet more amazing ancient invention. A map of the skies, written into the ground, that launched the birth of megacities themselves. New York is a megacity in every sense of the word. 1 million people travel across to Manhattan. $65 billion flows through the city's markets. Over 100,000 tourists arrive to marvel at the city's wonders every single day. This mass of synchronized events would instantly collapse without the mastery of one simple innovation: telling the time.
What's fascinating is that from about 4000 BC, humans become obsessed with dividing the day into smaller and smaller and smaller units of time. There's something about us, we desperately want to portion our day.
As our technology has advanced, societies have grown around central timekeeping devices. From ancient Chinese sundials to the medieval water clocks of the Middle East, clocks are the linchpin of human civilization.
Clocks are in every city. I mean, they're in every city today. They were right at the heart of every ancient city as well.
Yet the very first clocks did not measure hours. They measured days, months, even years. They were ancient calendars. A recent discovery of a mammoth calendar, 220 feet across, shows the ancients kept time on an interplanetary scale, with far greater accuracy than we would ever have thought possible. In the remote countryside of eastern Germany, archaeologist Andreas North took a plane journey across an area thought to contain nothing more than farmland.
The Henge monument was discovered by aerial photographs because of the differences in color in the bottom. So we can see the ditch, but only the ditch.
The images revealed a set of strange, unexplained markings. A ground-level investigation revealed evidence of an ancient settlement and a fascinating circular monument. This discovery sent shockwaves through the world of archaeology. It dates to over 2,000 years before Egypt's Great Pyramid and almost 7,000 years before modern New York. And it is called Gösek Henge, the world's first public timekeeping device. Just as the citizens of New York gather for the grand New Year countdown at Times Square, so did Neolithic man come together for life and death rituals to mark the calendar's longest day.
this monument was connected with dead, maybe with the past, but I think what is quite good visible here, it was connected with fertility. Yeah, because it was connected with the sun, and the sun brings the life every day, every year again.
After years of painstaking fieldwork, Andreas and his team have reconstructed the Goseck henge. 2,000 wooden stakes have been driven into the ground to replicate the sacred calendar that stood here in the 5th millennium BC. The team have discovered that this is a monument aligned with unerring accuracy to match the rising and setting of the Earth's sun.
All these gaps has astronomic orientations or references. For instance, these gaps are orientated to the winter solstice. This is a time with the shortest day and the longest night. Yeah? In the north we have an orientation to the summer solstice, so it's the longest day and the shortest night.
The southwestern and southeastern entrances are situated almost precisely 100 degrees apart. On the shortest day of the year, they mark the exact point at which the sun rises and sets, telling the ancients when a solar year has passed. Once we learned how to tell the time, people began to synchronize their lives and build even larger settlements.
This site is quite important because this is the first time that we have a cult place, a cult center for a bigger society.
How the ancient people of Goseck lived remains cloaked in mystery, but we do know that its power to mark the passage of time transformed this site into a sacred headquarters. Crop cycles, wars, and journeys could at last be measured, and the city was born. What's more, Goseck has opened up a groundbreaking new theory. Just 25 miles north at Ziegelrode Forest, archaeologists have unearthed incredible new evidence that later societies took this ancient astronomy to amazing new heights. 2,000 years before the first recorded planetarium, the Neolithic settlers of Europe mapped the celestial heavens with phenomenal accuracy. Professor Wolfhard Schlosser is a former space station engineer. He has used all his scientific expertise to decipher the riddles of an ancient astronomical artifact.
This is a Nebra disk. It is about 3,600 years old and was found in central Germany.
The Nebra disk appears to exhibit the same segments of a circle as were found at Goseck. When we align the two, we see that they fit like a modern combination lock. Both ancient discoveries seem to have been devices designed to mark the summer and winter solstices on the Earth's calendar.
Of course, we have no stars in Goseck, and we have, of course, no wood on the disk. But from the astronomical point of view, they are very similar, and they show that in these 3,300 years in between, the astronomy more or less remains the same.
Yet the Nebra disk has complexities that go far beyond the Goseck circle. For besides the sun and the moon, it also depicts 32 dots, including this obscure group of 7. There are no clues at Goseck or anywhere else in the region as to what the dots could represent. And there is nothing in the night sky of our world that remotely resembles them. But once we adjust the heavens for how the stars have changed in the 36 centuries since the disk was made, we find that they precisely match the Pleiades constellation, a famous star group that we may see today.
These objects have changed our attitude towards these old times. The disk was sacred in early times, early Bronze Age, and I'm convinced that then the meaning of the disk was lost.
The ancient studies of the cosmos launched an incredible journey of understanding that underpins the satellites and space stations of the 21st century. And it also changed our cities. As we mastered time and the heavens, arranging our lives has never been the same again. Yet what truly transformed cities into mega metropolises was an altogether more massive innovation: ancient stadiums. Only these stadiums didn't stage innocent sporting events. They housed epic blood bowls, killing up to 10,000 people at a time. Today, New York is a towering citadel of power. Wall Street stockbrokers, media moguls, and superstars stand at the crossroads of the world. Throughout history, one other city rivals New York's global reach, and that city is ancient Rome. 2,000 years ago, Rome was home to over 1 million people. Some believe that there were more people per square mile of the city than in modern Manhattan. Its population was as diverse as any modern metropolis, from rich to poor, from emperors to slaves.
As the population expanded, they become more and more cramped. And there's always a danger with enormous numbers of people in a tightly confined space. The political elite wanted to make sure they maintained control of the populace.
In Rome, just as in New York, the elites fought a battle for the hearts and minds of the populace. While Manhattan's power brokers used the media and public relations, the Romans' ingenious solution was to pacify the people with entertainment.
These entertainments were effectively a form of bribery. It was trying to gain popularity and approval of the masses as a form of subjugation or a form of control.
The emperor who provided the most exciting spectacle became incredibly popular. Popularity meant power. The challenge was on to develop the most technologically advanced entertainment systems the world had ever seen. Mass entertainment was born.
If we think of the huge ceremonies at the beginning of sporting events like the Olympics or the Super Bowl, laser shows, hundreds of people performing for a mass audience, we think this is quite powerful, quite dramatic. Bearing this in mind, if we're to believe some of the first-hand accounts of particularly some of the Imperial Roman events, these modern events pale into insignificance virtually.
The ultimate realization of this plan came in the form of the Colosseum. This 150-foot-high, multi-tiered mega monument was the biggest of its kind ever built.
The best estimate for the seating capacity of the Colosseum is something like 65 to 70,000 people. The really interesting thing is that this is probably the maximum capacity for an amphitheatre, in order for the spectators at the very back still to be able to see what is going on in the arena.
The Romans pushed the boundaries of audio-visual mass entertainment, and they did this using over 100,000 cubic yards of stone.
You would have needed an ox cart with a large block of stone in it, arriving at the building site every 2 or 3 minutes, day and night, over, say, 7 years of construction.
Amazingly, these feats of engineering have not changed in thousands of years. The secret of ultra-modern stadiums is that they copy the technology used by the Romans thousands of years ago.
It is a 74,500-seater stadium, and at the moment it's very quiet. But when the crowd is in, it's a very different story. The noise, the tension, the atmosphere is what makes a modern sports stadium. The design of the Roman amphitheatres and the Colosseum in particular, has not been bettered.
This modern stadium features a retractable roof supported by 4 giant pillars, an innovation 2,000 years old.
The covering of the spectator areas of the Colosseum was made out of, we think, canvas, strung out on masts using ropes. And this makes a lot of sense because what we do know is that there were 1,000 sailors from the Roman Navy stationed in Rome specifically to operate the awnings that covered the Colosseum.
Protected by their retractable roof, the Roman spectators would have been enthralled by gladiator death matches, executions, and the sacrifice of 9,000 animals in just 100 days. But as the Roman emperors provided more and more exotic and sophisticated spectacles, the crowds demanded more. Every year, the engineers had to invent even more amazing extravaganzas to satisfy the hungry appetite of the mob. In 85 AD, Emperor Domitian proposed the impossible. he would use 500 billion gallons of water in a spectacle known as a Naumachia.
A Naumachia is a recreated naval battle hosted in a place like the Colosseum, would have involved thousands of people, a spectacular set piece occasion, often recreating a historical battle. It would involve criminals, captives, other people who had no choice but to fight.
The Colosseum was flooded to allow the staging of a giant naval conflict. This transformation of the 29,000 square foot arena into a floating battlefield is a challenge that leaves even modern stadiums behind.
One of the issues we've looked at here is how we could actually hold a water event, how we could flood the lower area of the stadium in order to create some sort of water spectacle. And we haven't mastered that yet. And yet, 2,000 years ago, the Romans did exactly that.
The Naumachia was a resounding success, but it made things even worse for future emperors. How could Domitian's successors top this technological and engineering triumph to provide a spectacle for the crowd? The next emperor, Emperor Claudius, took to the throne in 41 AD, and he invented extreme Naumachia. This would employ 50 billion times more water. With no possible way of building a stadium large enough, he moved the entertainment to a massive lake, Lake Phocine. Now that great lake has been completely drained, but in 52 AD, these fields were the site for a sea battle between 50 ships and 19,000 performers.
Claudius's 19,000 gladiators who fought at his battle on the Fucine Lake is far bigger numbers than participate in the opening of the Olympic Games today.
500,000 spectators waited for the start of what would be the largest spectacle in history.
The battle on the Fucine Lake was started by an incredible mechanical device which raised a Triton, a mythological sea beast, from the floor of the lake.
From the still waters, a 40-foot-high solid silver statue of the god Triton appeared, as if by magic, with no sign of how it was powered. The texts tell of the crowds going ballistic. A horn in the Triton's mouth sounded, and the greatest fake sea battle ever staged began. At a lake shore in England, ancient investigator Richard Windley and his assistant have constructed a model of how Richard believes they accomplished this engineering success.
What I've tried to do is to use very simple technology, things that the Romans were used to dealing with on an everyday basis, pulleys, ropes. This really is a piece of technology that would be well within their capabilities. What we've basically got is 4 posts. Each one of these is lifting a corner of this framework here, which is supporting the device. Now, each corner is lifted via a cord which comes over the pulley here, down a pulley at the bottom, and they're all attached to a central ring. So each one of these pulls at exactly the same time, and in theory at exactly the same rate. So the whole thing should lift up perfectly symmetrically until it reaches the point of the pulleys, which is about here, by which time most of the statue would be above the level of the lake. We'll see if we've got everything set up correctly now. So Dave, if you'd like to take the tension and then just gently lift the figure. Okay, well, it's going up reasonably square at the moment. Oh, that's pretty good, actually. The difficulty with this is getting all the ropes at just precisely the right lengths, but I think we've got the adjustment correct now.
Richard's device is raised through human strength. But at the time of Claudius, he believes they would have had teams of oxen and slaves whose brute force would have lifted a much larger 40-foot-high statue out of the water. The result was a spectacle that drove the crowd wild and maintained Claudius's popularity and power on the throne.
What we found in terms of Roman technology is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a massive potential there. That the exploitation of technology by the Romans was on an unprecedented scale. And what we have is a very small part of what once must have existed.
The team's experiments have revealed how Rome and other ancient cities gave birth to the modern wonders of New York. Every Times Square extravaganza, every skyscraper, city monument, or event at Madison Square Garden owes a debt to the legendary city builders of our distant past. From gigantic water tunnels to colossal ancient statues, their visionary designs laid the foundations for New York over 1,500 years before the city we know today even existed.
Thanks for choosing Ancient Revelation, your #1 Ancient Investigations channel. Please subscribe and thank you.